Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So a farmer ordered a high-tech milking machine. Since the equipment arrived when his wife was out of town, he decided to test it on himself first. So, he inserted his manhood into the equipment, turned on the switch, and everything else was automatic. Soon, he found that the equipment provided him with much more pleasure than his wife did. When the fun was over, though, he quickly realized that he couldn't remove the instrument from his member. He read the manual but didn't find any useful information on how to disengage himself. He tried every button on the instrument, but still without success. Finally, he decided to call the supplier's customer service hotline with his cell phone. "Hello, I just bought a milking machine from your company. It works. Fantastic. But how do I remove it from the cow's udder?" "Don't worry," replied the customer service rep. "The machine will release automatically once it's collected 2 gallons. Have a nice day." So a hunter was rushed into the emergency room with a bear trap clamped onto his testicles. As the horrified doctor examined him, he asked, "Man, how did this happen?" The hunter explained, "I was out in the woods and felt the call of nature. While bending down by a tree, the trap snapped shut on my testicles." "Oh," said the doctor, "the pain must have been unbearable." "It was," replied the hunter, "second worst pain of my life." "Second worst?" the doctor asked. "What could possibly be worse than that?" The hunter sighed. "Coming to the end of the chain." So, 2 Texas farmers, Jim and Bob, were sitting in a bar, sipping their beers after a long day in the fields. Jim leaned back on his stool, looked over at Bob and said, "You know what? I'm going to go to college." Bob just raised an eyebrow, but Jim was already out the door, determined. When Jim arrived at the local college, he met the dean of administration, who explained the classes he'd need to take. "All right, Jim," the dean began. "You're going to take 4 classes: English, math, science, and logic." Jim scratched his head. "Logic? What the hell is that?" The dean smiled. "Let me give you an example. Do you own a weed whacker?" Jim straightened up proudly. "Yes, I do." "Well," the dean continued, "if you own a weed whacker, then logically you have a lawn." Jim's eyes lit up. Yes, I do have a lawn." "And if you have a lawn," the dean went on, "then logically you own a house." "That's right, I do have a house," Jim said, getting more excited. "And if you own a house, then logically you have a family." "Yes, I do have a family," Jim grinned. "And if you have a family, then logically you have a wife. And if you have a wife, then logically you're heterosexual." Jim slapped his knee in amazement. "Wow, you figured all that out just because I have a weed whacker?" "That's incredible," the dean chuckled. "That's what logic is, Jim." Thrilled with this new knowledge, Jim hurried back to the bar where Bob was still nursing his beer. He plopped down on the stool and announced, "Bob, I'm taking 4 classes in college: English, math, science, and logic." Bob squinted at him. "Logic? What the hell is that?" Jim grinned, ready to share his newfound wisdom. "I'll give you an example. Do you own a weed whacker?" Bob frowned. "No." Jim threw his hands up and declared, "Then you're gay." So, one day, a farmer was tending to his livestock when he noticed that one of his cows was completely cross-eyed. He called up a veterinarian friend of his, who told him to bring in his cow. The vet took one look at the cow, stuck a tube up the cow's butt, and blew into the tube until the cow's eyes straightened out. The vet charged the farmer $100, and the farmer went home happy. About a week later, the cow's eyes were cross-eyed again, but this time the farmer figured he could probably take care of it himself. So he called his hired hand over, and together they put a tube up the cow's butt. The farmer put his lips to the tube and started to blow. Strangely, nothing happened, so he asked his hired hand to give it a try. The hired hand removed the tube, turned it around, put it in the cow's butt, and started to blow. "What are you doing?" asked the farmer, horrified. The hired hand replied, "Well, I wasn't gonna use the side that you had put your lips on." So an old man was walking in the desert with his donkey when he reached a village. The people welcomed him with everything they could, offering him hospitality, taking care of his donkey and feeding him. While having dinner, he was surprised to be offered camel milk, as it is of notoriously bad taste. He thus asked about it, and was told that the village has been cursed with an everlasting drought, and that the people have resorted to saving however little water they could find for crops. "Truth be told, I am one of the wise," he said. "I know how to bring you rain. However, you must first bring me a wide bucket full of water, for I need some to bring more." The next morning, all of the villagers heard of his saying and started collecting every drop of water they still had in reserve. In the end, there was barely enough to qualify for a bucket, and they gave it to the man. He then took the water and walked within his host's house. There, he took off his dirty clothes and started washing them. A curious one of the kids saw him through the window and went on to alert everyone around. By the time they arrived, angry and shouting, it was already too late. The old man has washed all his clothes and was calmly hanging them. "Shame, shame on you, old man, for wasting our water when our kids don't have enough to drink," growled the chief. But as soon as he finished speaking, the sky darkened as the clouds gathered around the village. It started raining, and it did not stop for 5 days straight. People got their fill, and everyone's reserves were overflowing. The old man was treated as a guest of honor and a hero, and the chief apologized profusely for ever doubting him. Only when he was about to leave had the kid gathered the courage to ask about how he did it. "It's simple," said the old man. "This always happens when I hang my clothes to dry." So a government man approaches a pig farmer and asks him what he feeds his pigs. The farmer answers, "Oh, the pigs. I just feed them whatever scraps I have lying around." The man is shocked. He says, "Sir, that is animal cruelty. I'll have to fine you $10,000. The next day, another official approaches the farmer and asks him what he feeds his pigs. The farmer replies, "Only the finest products, sir. Caviar, artisanal cheeses, and hand-picked salads." The man is shocked. He says, "Sir, that food is way too rich for them. They'll get sick. I'll have to fine you $10,000. The third day, another man approaches the farmer again and asks him what he feeds his pigs. The farmer answers, "Oh, the pigs. I just give them $20 each and let them shop themselves." So a big city lawyer was representing the railroad in a lawsuit filed by an old rancher. The rancher's prize bull was missing from the section through which the railroad passed. The rancher only wanted to be paid the fair value of the bull. The case was scheduled to be tried before the justice of the peace in the back room of the general store. The attorney for the railroad immediately cornered the rancher and tried to get him to settle out of court. The lawyer did his best-selling job, and finally the rancher agreed to take half of what he was asking. After the rancher had signed the release and took the check, the young lawyer couldn't resist gloating a little over his success, telling the rancher, "You know, I hate to tell you this, old man, but I put one over on you in there." I couldn't have won the case. The engineer was asleep, and the fireman was in the caboose when the train went through your ranch that morning. I didn't have one witness to put on the stand. I bluffed you, the old rancher replied. Well, I'll tell you, young feller, I was a little worried about winning that case myself, because that bull came home this morning. So a young man named Joe bought a horse from a farmer for $250. The farmer agreed to deliver the horse within the next few days. Couple of days later, the farmer drove up to Joe's house and said, "Sorry, son, but I have some bad news. The horse died." Joe replied, "Well, then just give me my money back." The farmer said, "Can't do that. I've spent it already." Joe said, "Okay then, just bring me the dead horse." The farmer asked, "What you gonna do with it?" Joe said, "I'm going to raffle him off." The farmer said, "You can't raffle a dead horse." Joe said, "Sure I can, watch me. I just won't tell anybody he's dead." A month later, the farmer met up with Joe and asked, "What happened with that dead horse?" Joe said, "I raffled him off. I sold 500 tickets at $5 apiece and made a profit of $2,495. The farmer said, "Didn't anyone complain?" Joe said, "Just the guy who won. So I gave him his $5 back." So an extraordinarily handsome man decided he had the God-given responsibility to marry the perfect woman so they could produce children beyond comparison. With that as his mission, he began searching for the perfect woman. After a diligent but fruitless search up and down the East Coast, he started to head west. Shortly after, he met a farmer who had 3 stunning, gorgeous daughters that took his breath away. He explained his mission to the farmer and asked for permission to marry one of them. The farmer replied, "They're all looking to get married, so you came to the right place. Look them over and choose the one you want." The man dated the first daughter. The next day, the farmer asked for his opinion. "Well," said the man, "she's just a little bit, not that you can hardly notice, pigeon-toed." The farmer nodded and suggested the man date another daughter. So the man went out with the second one. The next day, the farmer asked how things went. "Well," the man replied, "she's just a little bit, not that you can hardly tell, cross-eyed." The farmer nodded again and suggested he try the third daughter. So he did. The next morning, the man rushed in exclaiming, "She's perfect, just perfect. She's the one I want to marry." So they were wed right away. Months later, the baby was born. When the man visited the nursery, he was horrified. The baby, though cute, had the ugliest face he had ever seen. He rushed to his father-in-law, asking how such a thing could happen considering the parents. "Well," explained the farmer, "she was just a little bit, not that you could hardly tell, pregnant when you met her." So John went to visit his 90-year-old grandfather in a very secluded rural area of Saskatchewan. After spending a great evening chatting the night away, the next morning John's grandfather prepared a breakfast of bacon, eggs, and toast. However, John noticed a film-like substance on his plate and questioned his grandfather, asking, "Are these plates clean?" His grandfather replied, "They're as clean as cold water can get them. Just you go ahead and finish your meal, Sonny." For lunch, the old man made hamburgers. Again, John was concerned about the plates, as his appeared to have tiny specks around the edge that looked like dried egg, and asked, "Are you sure these plates are clean?" Without looking up, the old man said, "I told you before, Sonny, those dishes are as clean as cold water can get them. Now don't you fret. I don't want to hear another word about it." Later that afternoon, John was on his way to a nearby town, and as he was leaving, his grandfather's dog started to growl and wouldn't let him pass. John yelled, "Grandfather, your dog won't let me get to my car." Without diverting his attention from the football game he was watching on TV, the old man shouted, "Coldwater, go lay down now! You hear me?" So a young farm boy accidentally overturned his wagon full of corn. The farmer, who lived nearby, heard the crash and came running. "Hey, Willis," the farmer shouted, "forget your troubles. Come inside and have dinner with us. Afterward, I'll help you get the wagon back up." "That's mighty kind of you," Willis said, "but I don't think Dad would like it." "Nonsense. Come on," the farmer insisted. "Well, okay," the boy agreed, "but Dad won't like it." After a hearty dinner, Willis thanked his host. "I feel a lot better now, but I just know Dad is going to be upset." "Don't be silly," the neighbor said with a smile. "By the way, where is your dad?" The little boy replied, "Under the wagon." So, in a rural program for farmers, a female TV reporter set out to find possible causes of mad cow disease. She arranged an interview with a local farmer who might have some theories. The reporter asked, "I'm here to collect information on the possible sources of mad cow disease. Can you offer any reason for this illness?" The farmer looked at her and said, "Did you know that a bull mounts a cow only once a year?" The reporter, a bit embarrassed, replied, "Well, sir, that's new information, but what does that have to do with mad cow disease?" The farmer continued, "Miss, did you know that we milk a cow twice a day?" "That's interesting," the reporter said, "but could you please get to the point?" "I am getting to the point, miss," the farmer said. "Just imagine if I was playing with your breasts twice a day, but only made love with you once a year. Wouldn't you get mad too?" The interview was never aired. So, a traveling salesman whose car has broken down goes to the door of the closest farmhouse. The farmer says, "You can spend the night, but you'll have to share a room with my daughter." The daughter, a gorgeous 20-something, winks at him over her father's shoulder. "Oh, I don't mind that," exclaims the salesman. "Just one thing," says the farmer. "No funny business. If you touch her, I'll kill you." "Oh, no, sir," says the salesman. "You can count on me." Just to be safe, the farmer builds a wall of eggs between the two beds in the daughter's room. To get through, one of them would have to break them. However, in the middle of the night, the salesman can no longer control himself, busts through the eggs, and he and the willing farmer's daughter spend some passionate time together. They break all the eggs in the process. When they're done, they spend the rest of the night piecing the eggs back together one by one and rebuilding the wall. They couldn't get the yolks in, so they just glued the shells together and threw away the rest, so there was a wall of empty eggs. The next morning, the farmer goes to his daughter's room and takes a couple of eggs to the kitchen to make breakfast. However, all the eggs he tries turn out empty. When the salesman wakes up, he goes down and is surprised to find the farmer staring out the window at his chickens, holding a shotgun. "What are you doing?" asks the man. The farmer continues to stare. "I think one of my roosters is using a condom." So there was a farmer who grew watermelons. He was doing pretty well, but he was disturbed by some local kids who would sneak into his watermelon patch at night and eat his watermelons. After some careful thought, he came up with a clever idea that he thought would scare the kids away for sure. He made up a sign and posted it in the field. The next night, the kids showed up and they saw the sign which read, "Warning. One of the watermelons in this field has been injected with cyanide." The kids ran off, made up their own sign and posted it next to the farmer's. When the farmer returned, he surveyed the field. He noticed that no watermelons were missing, but the sign next to his read, "Now there are 2." So a farmer drove to a neighbor's farmhouse and knocked the door. A boy, about 9, opened the door. "Is your dad or mom home?" said the farmer. "No, they went to town," replied the kid. The farmer asked, "How about your brother, Howard? Is he here?" Again, the kid replied, "No, he went with mom and dad." The farmer stood there for a few minutes, shifting from one foot to the other, mumbling to himself, when the young boy says, "I know where all the tools are, if you want to borrow one, or I can give Dad a message." "Well," said the farmer uncomfortably, "no, I really want to talk to your dad about your brother Howard getting my daughter Susie pregnant." The boy thought for a moment, then said, "You'll have to talk to my dad about that. I know he charges $50 for the bulls and $15 for the pigs, but I have no idea how much he charges for Howard." So a man who had spent his whole life in the countryside visited a friend. He'd never seen a train or the tracks they run on. While standing in the middle of the railroad tracks, he heard a whistle but didn't know what it was. Predictably, he's hit and is thrown, ass over kettle, to the side of the tracks, with some minor internal injuries, a few broken bones, and some bruises. After weeks in the hospital recovering, he's at his friend's house, attending a party. While in the kitchen, he suddenly hears the kettle whistling. He grabs a baseball bat from the nearby closet and proceeds to batter and bash the kettle into an unrecognizable lump of metal. His friend, hearing the ruckus, rushes into the kitchen, sees what has happened, and asks the hillbilly, "Why'd you ruin my good kettle?" He replied, "Man, you gotta kill these things when they're small." So, a man owned a small ranch in Montana. The Montana Workforce Department claimed he was not paying proper wages to his help and sent an agent out to interview him. "I need a list of your employees and how much you pay them," demanded the agent. "Well," replied the farmer, "there's my farmhand who's been with me for 3 years. I pay him $200 a week, plus he gets free room and board. The cook has been here for 18 months, and I pay her $150 per week, plus free room and board. Then there's the half-wit. He works about 18 hours every day and does about 90% of all the work around here. He makes about $10 per week, pays his own room and board, and I buy him a bottle of bourbon every Saturday night. He also sleeps with my wife occasionally. That's the guy I want to talk to." "The half-wit," said the agent. "That would be me," replied the rancher. So a pretty blonde woman is driving down a country road in her new sports car when something goes wrong and it breaks down. Luckily, she happens to be near a farmhouse. She goes up to the farmhouse and knocks on the door. When the farmer answers, she says to him, "It's Sunday night and my car broke down. I don't know what to do. Can I stay here for the night until tomorrow when I can get some help?" "Well," drawls the farmer, "you can stay here, but I don't want you messing with my sons, Jed and Luke." She looks through the screen door and sees 2 men standing behind the farmer. She judges them to be in the early 20s. "Okay," she says. After they have gone to bed for the night, the woman begins to get a little horny just thinking about the two boys in the room next to her. So she quietly goes into their room and says, "Boys, how would you like for me to teach you the ways of the world?" They say, "Huh?" She says, "The only thing is, I don't want to get pregnant, so you have to wear these rubbers." She puts them on the boys, and the three of them go at it all night long. 5 years later, Jed and Luke are sitting on the front porch, rocking back and forth. Jed says, "You remember that blonde woman that came by here about 5 years ago and showed us the ways of the world?" "Yeah," says Luke, "I remember." "Well, do you care if she gets pregnant?" "Nope," says Luke, "I reckon not." "Then let's take these bloody things off." So a busload of politicians were driving down a country road one afternoon when all of a sudden, the bus ran off the road and crashed into a tree in an old farmer's field. Seeing what happened, the old farmer went over to investigate. He then proceeded to dig a hole and bury the politicians. A few days later, the local sheriff came out, saw the crashed bus, and asked the old farmer, were they all dead? "Well," the old farmer replied with a thoughtful expression, "some of them said they weren't, but you know how them politicians lie." So a husband and wife were driving down a country lane on their way to visit some friends. They came to a muddy patch in the road and the car became bogged. After a few minutes of trying to get the car out by themselves, they saw a young farmer coming down the lane, driving some oxen before him. The farmer stopped when he saw the couple in trouble and offered to pull the car out of the mud for $50. The husband accepted, and minutes later, the car was free. The farmer turned to the husband and said, "You know, you're the 10th car I've helped out of the mud today." The husband looks around at the fields incredulously and asks the farmer, "When do you have time to plow your land?" "At night." "No," the young farmer replied seriously. "Night is when I put the water in the hole." So during a terrible storm, all the highway signs were covered with snow. The following spring, the state decided to raise all the signs 12 inches at a cost of $6 million. "That's an outrageous price," said a local farmer. "But I guess we're lucky the state handled it instead of the federal government." "Why's that?" asked the state trooper that was talking to him. The farmer paused for a minute before he responded. "Because knowing the federal government, they'd have decided to lower the highways." So many years ago, there were two sisters, one blonde and one brunette, who inherited the family ranch. Unfortunately, after just a few years, they are in financial trouble. In order to keep the bank from repossessing the ranch, they need to purchase a bull from a stockyard in a faraway town so that they can breed their own stock. They only have $600 left. Upon leaving, the brunette tells her sister, "When I get there, if I decide to buy the bull, I'll contact you to drive out after me and haul it home." The brunette arrives at the stockyard, inspects the bull, and decides she wants to buy it. The man tells her that he will sell it for $599, no less. After paying him, she drives to the nearest town to send her sister a telegram to tell her the news. She walks into the telegraph office and says, "I want to send a telegram to my sister telling her that I've bought a bull for our ranch. I need her to hitch the trailer to our pickup truck and drive out here so we can haul it home." The telegraph operator explains that he'll be glad to help her, then adds, "It's just 99 cents a word." Well, after paying for the bull, the brunette only has $1 left. She realizes that she'll only be able to send her sister one word. After a few minutes of thinking, she nods and says, "I want you to send her the word comfortable." The operator shakes his head. How is she ever going to know that you want her to hitch the trailer to your pickup truck and drive out here to haul that bull back to your ranch if you send her just the word comfortable? The brunette explains. My sister's blonde. The word's big. She'll read it very slowly. Come for day bull. So a guy was driving past a farm one day when he noticed a beautiful horse stood in one of the fields. Hoping to buy the horse, the guy stopped and offered the farmer $500 for it. The farmer said, "Sorry, he's not for sale. He doesn't look too good." The guy said, "He looks just fine. Tell you what, I'll give you $1,000 for him." The farmer again said, "Sorry, he's not for sale. He doesn't look too good." The guy now really wanted the horse, and so increased his offer to $1,500. The farmer said, "Well, he doesn't look so good, but if you want him that much, he's yours." So the guy bought the horse and took him home. The next day, he returned to the farm, hopping mad. He shouted at the farmer, "Hey, you cheated me! You sold me a blind horse." The farmer calmly said, "I told you he didn't look too good, didn't I?" So a fellow walks into a bar, looking miserable. The bartender asks, "What's the matter?" The fellow replies, "Well, I've got these two horses, and I can't tell them apart. I don't know if I'm mixing up their riding times or even feeding them the right foods." Feeling sorry for him, the bartender suggests, "Why don't you shave the tail of one of the horses?" The man brightens up and says, "That's a good idea. I'll try it." A few months later, he comes back to the bar in even worse shape. "What's the matter now?" the bartender asks. The fellow, nearly in tears, says, "I shaved the tail of one of the horses, but it grew back, and now I can't tell them apart again." Trying to be patient, the bartender suggests, "Why don't you shave the mane this time? Maybe that won't grow back." The man nods, has a drink, and leaves. Months later, he's back again, more pitiful than ever. Before the bartender can say anything, the fellow blurts out, "I shaved the mane of one of the horses, and it grew back." Now frustrated, the bartender yells, "For crying out loud, just measure them. Maybe one's taller than the other." The man storms out, insulted. The next day, he bursts back into the bar, grinning ear to ear. "It worked. It worked." He shouts, "I measured the horses, and the black one is 2 inches taller than the white one." So, an American man was driving through the South when he decided he wanted to buy a pig. He stopped at a pig farm and told the farmer he wanted a 100-pound pig. The farmer nodded, walked into the sty, bent over, and picked up a pig by its tail with his teeth. "This one will go a little over 100, the farmer said. Astonished, the Yankee replied, "Who are you trying to fool? You can't weigh a pig that way." The farmer laughed and called to his young son, "Boy, come over here and weigh this pig for the man." The boy bent down, picked up the pig by its tail with his teeth and said, "This pig weighs about 100 pounds. The Yankee wasn't buying it, so to convince him, the farmer told his son, "Go to the house and get your mom so she can weigh the pig." After a short delay, the boy came back and said, "Mom says she'll be right down after she's finished weighing the mailman." So it just happens that a long time ago, and for the first time in their lives, two country boys take their first flight from Florida to New York. While they're talking to each other, they get interrupted by an announcement from the pilot. "Sorry to disturb you all, but I think it's best you know one of our engines has failed." Don't worry, we can still make it on 3 engines, but there'll be a delay of 1 hour. So they begin talking again, but soon another announcement is heard. We regret to inform you that our 2nd engine has failed, which will mean another delay of 1 hour, but don't worry, we'll still make it. So the two grumble a bit, but not for long, as the pilot's voice is heard again after a few minutes. Unfortunately, our 3rd engine has failed, meaning there will be a delay of another hour to the journey. One of them turns to his friend and says, "Well, darn, if that last engine fails, we'll be up here all night." So a country boy who had lived his whole life in the village finally got permission on his 16th birthday to go visit his older sister in New York. What the family didn't know was that the daughter was a working girl, and she was terrified her younger brother would find out. When he arrived, he asked her what she did for a living. Thinking quickly, she said, "Oh, this is New York. I sell hot dogs." "Oh, wow," the boy said excitedly. "I love hot dogs, and I heard New York has the best. Can I come with you tomorrow to work and get a free one, please?" His sister, panicked, shook her head. "No, I'll be far too busy. But don't worry, I'll bring you one when I get back." A little disappointed, the boy agreed. But the next afternoon, when his sister left, he decided to follow her. She walked into a large, fancy house, which seemed like a strange place to sell hot dogs. Curious, he slipped inside after her. There he was, greeted by a beautiful woman wearing very little. She smiled at him and purred, "Hi there, handsome. Did you come to satisfy your appetite?" "I sure did," the boy replied enthusiastically. "Wonderful," she said with a grin. "How do you like it, standing up or lying down?" The boy thought for a moment and answered, "Well, I'd rather have it in a bun." So a big city lawyer went duck hunting in rural North Alberta. He shot and dropped a bird, but it fell into a farmer's field on the other side of a fence. As the lawyer climbed over the fence, an elderly farmer drove up on his tractor and asked him what he was doing. The litigator responded, "I shot a duck and it fell in this field, and now I'm going to retrieve it." The old farmer, Peter, replied, "This is my property, and you are not coming over here." The indignant lawyer said, "I am one of the best trial lawyers in Canada, and if you don't let me get that duck, I'll sue you and take everything you own." The old farmer smiled and said, "Apparently, you don't know how we settle disputes in Alberta. We settle small disagreements like this with the 3-kick rule." The lawyer asked, "What is the 3-kick rule?" The farmer replied, "Well, because the dispute occurs on my land, I get to go first. I kick you 3 times, and then you kick me 3 times, and so on, back and forth, until someone gives up." The lawyer thought about the proposed contest and decided that he could easily take the old codger. He agreed to abide by the local custom. The old farmer slowly climbed down from the tractor and walked up to the attorney. His first kick planted the toe of his heavy steel-toed work boot into the lawyer's groin and dropped him to his knees. His second kick to the midriff sent the lawyer's last meal gushing from his mouth. The lawyer was on all fours when the farmer's third kick to his rear end sent him face first into a fresh cow pie. Summoning every bit of his will and remaining strength, the lawyer very slowly managed to get to his feet. Wiping his face with the arm of his jacket, he said, "Okay, you old fart. Now it's my turn." The old farmer smiled and said, "You can have the duck." So a farmer had just bought a new rooster for his hens, and the old rooster, who had been around for years, was worried he'd be replaced. But he had a clever plan to deal with his young rival. He went up to the new rooster and said, "I'll make you a deal. Let's race for the hens. 1 lap around the farmhouse. If you win, I'll leave. If I win, you leave." The new rooster, much younger and confident, knew he could easily outrun the old-timer, so he agreed. However, the old rooster added, "Since I'm older, you should let me start halfway around the farmhouse before you begin. That way, it's fair." The younger rooster thought it was no problem and agreed. The race began. The old rooster set off, already huffing and puffing by the halfway mark. The young rooster bolted off like a rocket and quickly began closing the gap. By the time the old rooster reached 3/4 of the way, he was gasping for breath, barely holding on. The younger rooster was right behind him, just seconds from overtaking him. Suddenly, bam! The farmer's shotgun rang out. The young rooster collapsed in a heap of feathers. "Darn," the farmer muttered. "Third gay rooster this month." So there was a farmer who had 3 daughters. All of his 3 daughters were going on their first dates that same evening. Being protective of them, he decided to meet their suitors at the front door with his gun. So the first suitor arrived and told the farmer, "Hi, I'm Joe. I'm here for Flo. We're going to the show. Is she ready to go?" The farmer thought this was okay, and they went on their way. The second suitor arrived, and the farmer answered the door. "Hi, my name's Eddie. I'm here for Betty. We're gonna get some spaghetti. Is she ready?" The farmer thought this one was okay too, so off the 2 kids went. The third suitor arrived shortly after. "Hi, my name's Chuck." And the farmer shot him.